Hello and welcome to PMCLounge.com. This is Lounge Fever, a series of videos where we try to answer your questions. And these days, since we are focusing on agile topics, if you don't already know, PMP is now 50% agile. So we are covering agile topics, which will be helpful for you in covering that 50% of the PMP exam, as well as if you're preparing for other agile related certifications like ACP. So check out the first link in the description. That is going to be the entire playlist of all the agile videos that we have done so far. More coming soon. So what happens is when we cover videos on a certain topic, we receive questions around that topic. And one of the questions we received is actually a very classic misunderstanding when it comes to agile projects. Agile is equals to no specs, no requirement specifications document. Is that correct? Let's find out in this video. Before we proceed, I'd quickly like to remind you, please hit that like button. We like you too. And that seems to be the only way YouTube is going to let you know the next time we upload a video. Now, I want you to step back and think for a minute. Delivering an entire project, yes, you're following agile way of delivery, but delivering an entire project without a specifications document, is that too good to be true? The answer is a big yes. It is too good to be true. And agile teams need documentation. That's the single statement you need to understand and learn. And it's a fact that agile teams and agile projects also need documentation. Now, let me give you an example. So, you are working on a project and your team has worked on something for 2 months. 2 months down the line, one of the engineers in the development team wants to ensure that whatever has been built is exactly what the team set out to build to begin with, right? 2 months ago, this is what we set out to build, and now 2 months down the line, I want to ensure the developer is saying so, that I want to ensure whatever that we have built is exactly what we set out to build. But who remembers what exactly we set out to build 2 months ago, right? So if you don't have documentation, these are the kind of issues that you're going to basically come across. If there wasn't any documentation, what would you refer back to in future to understand exactly what you set out to build? So you have to have some kind of documentation to refer back to in the future. And 2 months is actually a long time. Let me give you another example. A week later, the product manager needs to explain some kind of requirements to one of the developers. Now, how does the product manager ensures that he is communicating the right requirements? The product manager needs to ensure that not just he's communicating the right requirements, he needs to be in alignment with whatever that has been communicated with other stakeholders of the project. So if you don't have written documents, then if you need to communicate the requirements with your developers or dependent teams, how are you going to ensure that everyone is in alignment? So documentation is definitely required even for agile projects. So agile is equals to no specs. That is absolutely wrong. Now, all that being said, I'd like to remind you that Agile values comprehensive documentation. You need to have comprehensive documentation, and Agile values it. It is also true that Agile values working software more than comprehensive documentation, but it does not mean that Agile is equals to no specifications. If you're looking for book recommendations for your PMP exam, you can head over to pmclounge.com/resources. We keep this page up to date at all times. So I just mentioned that Agile values comprehensive documentation more, and I hope you recall the Agile values. Individuals and interactions over process and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation. And this is where the entire question actually emanates from. Just because one of the agile values says that working software is more important or is valued over comprehensive documentation, this does not mean that there's no value in comprehensive documentation. So I just wanted to remind you of the agile values, because if you basically learn these agile values, it is going to help you not just with your agile projects, not just with your certification exam, but also in certain interviews, right? Because let's say you're in an interview and the interviewer asks you, hey, what is your favorite agile value? And you don't even remember the agile values, right? So it is important to kind of refer to these agile values every now and then, just to ensure that they are fresh in your memory and you remember them. And it is also going to ensure that you don't get stuck into questions like these, where somebody says, hey, you're doing an agile project, why do you need documentation? Well, we still need documentation. Yes, it is true that we value working software more than comprehensive documentation, but it does not mean that we are not going to have documentation at all. So a good question to ask here is, it looks like even for projects that follow the agile way of project delivery, you still need to have comprehensive documentation. Then is there a difference between how documentation is handled on agile projects versus the traditional waterfall projects? Well, of course, yes, there is a difference. So typically, and this is not true 100% of the time, but typically on a traditional project, what you're going to see is a shared live Word document which is 200-page long, and it is called SR document, System Requirements Document, or System Requirements Specification Document. So this is a 200-page long document. Half of the stakeholders of the project have never gone over this document, but it is the source of truth. It is one document which is shared with anyone asking anything related to requirements of the project. Now, this is something which is what you're going to typically see on traditional waterfall projects. Now, on agile projects, you may still see a SR document, and like I said, this is not true 100% of the time, but most of the time on projects that follow the agile way of delivery, you might see a software like Jira, and this software is basically used to document the requirements. So that's the difference between agile projects and traditional waterfall projects. Like I said, it is not going to be true 100% of the time. There are going to be outliers, but typically on agile projects, you should not see 200-page long document called a system requirement specification document. Instead, you should see something which is sleeker, something a software that is basically used to document the requirements. Now, how it helps is that we need to understand that different stakeholders of the project, they may expect different things from a requirements document. So if you provide the SRS document, the 200 page long Word document, to the user or to the project manager, it is possible that these people have no use of this document, because this document contains so much technical jargons, so many technical jargons, and so much of technical details that it is of no use for these people. But it is possible that it is of a lot of use for for a developer or a development team. So that is the difference between using a single document to document all your requirements versus using something like a software like Jira, where specific users can access specific information. It is neatly arranged. It is software. It is not a document. You don't have to scroll around, right? So that's the difference between agile projects and traditional waterfall projects. in terms of how they deal with documenting their requirements. So that's all that we had in this video. I hope you now understand that agile projects also require comprehensive documentation of requirements and how there's a difference between documenting requirements for a waterfall project versus an agile project. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I'll see you guys in the next video.